Jessica believed she had built her life on solid promises: love, family, partnership. But when an unexpected recording exposed the man with whom she had shared decades of dreams, what was at stake went far beyond betrayal. Faced with the scandal, she didn't scream, flee, or hide. Instead, she made a decision that no one expected, and that would make the world around her rethink the true meaning of strength, dignity, and starting over. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Under the afternoon sun, the typical bustle of the university was like a symphony around Jessica and George. She, with her psychology notebooks hugged against her chest, smiled as he talked about the technology projects he was developing. Their eyes shone with mutual admiration, as often happens when two young people discover they share dreams bigger than themselves. When the pregnancy test showed positive, Jessica felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. At 21, with only 2 semesters completed, she had to leave college. There was no sadness in her decision, just determination. George held her hands in that small student apartment and promised, "As soon as I graduate, we'll get married. And when things settle down, you will return to finish your studies, I promise." Benjamin was born on a spring morning. With curious eyes that resembled George's and Jessica's gentle smile, he brought light to the small apartment they now called home. George graduated with honours, and as promised, they were married in a simple ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. "Forever," George whispered in her ear as they danced their first waltz as a married couple. The first years passed in a whirlwind. George worked tirelessly, climbing the corporate ladder with impressive determination. Jessica took care of Benjamin, keeping alive the dream of returning to university. On the rare nights when George arrived home early, they sat on the small living room sofa, Benjamin asleep between them, and planned the future. "When you return to university, we'll hire a nanny to help with Benjamin," George would say, stroking her hair. "I don't want to miss any important moments," Jessica would reply, looking at their sleeping son. When Benjamin turned 5, the family was financially stable, and Jessica finally returned to her studies. The mornings were filled with classes, while the afternoons and evenings were dedicated to her son and the household. George, now a department manager, spent more and more time at the office. "It's just a phase," he would assure whenever he missed a dinner or a school performance. "When I reach the top, I'll have more time for you." Jessica believed him. She always believed. Jessica's graduation was a moment of personal triumph. With Benjamin holding a small bouquet of flowers and George clapping proudly, she received her diploma, feeling that she could finally balance career and family. A week later, she discovered her second pregnancy. During the following months, Jessica suffered from severe nausea and complications that left her bedridden for weeks. George showed genuine concern, taking on household responsibilities on the weekends and hiring a helper for the weekdays. "It's okay, dear. Rest and focus on getting better," he would say as he stroked her forehead. "After our baby is born, you can get a job." Madeline was born strong and healthy, with her mother's calm temperament. Benjamin, now an articulate 6-year-old boy, was enchanted by his little sister. The house felt complete. 4 months later, the positive pregnancy test seemed like a cruel joke of fate. Jessica cried for hours, not for the child that was to come, but for the postponement of her professional dreams once again. George was at a conference when she called to share the news. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before he responded with a tone of voice that tried to hide the surprise. "We'll find a way," he finally said. "We always do." Gabriel was born on a stormy night. Unlike his siblings, he seemed restless from day one, as if he wanted to make up for lost time. Jessica, now divided among 3 children of different ages, found small moments for herself in the silent early mornings when everyone else was asleep. One of those nights, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of warm tea, she found an old college notebook. Flipping through the pages, she recalled her former dream, helping people through psychology. Something inside her was rekindled. The years passed, and George's career skyrocketed. Vice President, Executive Director, and finally, CEO of a promising technology company. With each promotion came new commitments, more frequent travel, and longer absences. Jessica became the constant in the children's lives. She was the one who organised birthday parties, supervised homework, took them to the doctor, prepared special dinners, and planned the rare family vacations. George's job was simply to show up, which he sometimes did, armed with his cell phone, taking calls or responding to messages. When Benjamin entered adolescence and the younger ones already attended school regularly, Jessica decided it was time. A college friend, Sophia, had opened a psychology practice and offered her a room. "Just twice a week to start," Jessica explained to George during a dinner he attended. "I can adjust my hours according to the kids' schedule." George seemed genuinely happy. "You deserve this, Jess. I always wanted to see you achieve your dream." The first patients came through referrals from Sophia. Jessica discovered that the years of motherhood and family management had given her a unique perspective on the issues many faced. Her schedule soon filled up, and the 2 weekly sessions turned into 5. At home, there was a new energy. Jessica shared anonymous stories of overcoming challenges with the children, showing them the value of resilience. George, on the rare nights he dined with the family, listened with a smile on his face, though he was often interrupted by his phone. It was on an ordinary afternoon that the world collapsed. Gabriel, now 5 years old, complained of persistent pain. The diagnosis came as a blow, a rare disease that would require intensive treatment. Without hesitation, Jessica called her friend Sophia. "I need to refer my patients. Gabriel needs me full-time." The months that followed were a blur of hospitals, medications, and sleepless nights. Jessica remained steadfast, alternating between the hospital and home, ensuring that Benjamin and Madeleine also received attention. George visited when he could, always bringing gifts and words of encouragement, but rarely stayed for more than a few hours. "The company is at a crucial moment," he explained. "I need to ensure our financial future, especially now." Jessica understood, or tried to understand. In the loneliest moments she would embrace Gabriel and whisper stories of courage, both to soothe her son and to strengthen herself. The remission of the illness came gradually. Each positive test was celebrated as a small victory. When they finally received the news that Gabriel was out of danger, Jessica cried for hours, releasing all the accumulated tension. Life went on. Benjamin, now a teenager, showed an interest in technology, following in his father's footsteps. Madeleine excelled in her studies, dreaming of becoming a doctor. Gabriel, resilient after the illness, had become an observant and sensitive boy. Jessica never returned to her practice. The years of caring for Gabriel had created a gap in her career that seemed impossible to fill. Instead, she channeled her training in psychology into volunteer work at the local church, counselling families in difficult situations. George, now a well-established CEO, rarely spent time at home. When he did, he tried to make up for it with grand gestures, expensive jewellery, lavish flowers, promises of trips that rarely materialised. Jessica accepted it all with a polite smile, keeping to herself the growing sense of emptiness. On a Friday like any other, Jessica found herself alone at home. Benjamin was at a college party, Madeleine was in a study group, and Gabriel was sleeping at a cousin's house. George was on a supposed business trip to the capital. Jessica then decided to attend a special women's event at the church, seeking some company and meaning. The evening passed pleasantly with inspiring talks and comforting conversations. It was during the fellowship coffee that Jessica noticed something strange. Women were whispering, looking in her direction, and then at their phones. Some averted their eyes when she returned the eye contact. "Jessica." Clara's voice, her closest friend in the congregation, sounded beside her. "Can we talk in private?" In the small pastoral office, Clara showed her the video circulating on social media. It was a recording of a live broadcast of a popular music show by a famous national singer. The camera panned across the VIP audience, and there was George, not on a business trip, holding hands with a younger woman. They exchanged glances, smiles, and at one point, a kiss. Jessica immediately recognized the woman, Amanda, a marketing executive who worked directly with George. She had dined at their home several times along with other colleagues of her husband, always with admiring comments about how Jessica managed to keep everything in order while raising 3 children. The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. Jessica couldn't breathe. Clara hugged her, holding her as violent sobs shook her body. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the deceit, the public display, the humiliation. "My children," she managed to say between sobs. "They must have seen." Clara took her home where Benjamin, Madeline and Gabriel were waiting for her. All 3 had received the video from friends, messages questioning, cruel taunts. Benjamin, with the anger typical of youth, wanted to confront their father. Madeline cried silently. Gabriel, still not fully understanding, hugged his mother tightly. Jessica's phone kept ringing with calls from George, the children's phones too. No one answered. That night, the 4 of them huddled together in the double bed, as they did when the children were little and had nightmares. Now the nightmare was real and shared. "What are we going to do, Mum?" asked Madeline at a certain point. Jessica had no answer. Her entire adult life had been built around George and the children. She had postponed her dreams, sacrificed her career, put her needs last. Now, at 42, she felt lost. The next morning, they heard the front door open urgently. George entered the room, his face marked by the sleepless night, his eyes red. Seeing the family gathered on the bed, he stopped, as if struck by an invisible force. "Children, can you give us a moment?" Jessica asked calmly. When they were alone, there were no screams or accusations. Jessica observed the man in front of her, the same one she had met at university, with whom she had shared so many moments, to whom she had dedicated her life. Now he seemed like a stranger. "Jess, I can explain," he began. "How long?" she interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. George hesitated. 6 months, he finally admitted. The silence that followed weighed tons. George continued speaking, words that sounded like empty excuses to Jessica's ears. He mentioned pressure at work, loneliness during trips, a moment of weakness that turned into something more. "George, I need time," she said when he finally fell silent. "I can't look at you now and see the man I loved for over 20 years. He nodded, defeated. "I'll stay at my parents' house for now." After George left, Jessica remained still, trying to process what had happened and what would come next. The children returned to the room, forming a protective circle around her. "We are with you, Mum," said Benjamin, holding her hand. "No matter what you decide." In the days that followed, Jessica faced an internal storm. Part of her wanted to fight for the marriage, to rebuild what had been broken. Another part, however, recognized that the betrayal was just a symptom of a larger problem, years of emotional neglect and disconnection. Financial worries were constant. How would she start over? How would she support herself after so many years of relying on George? The house they lived in, the cars, the bills, everything was in his name or paid with his salary. It was then that she received a call from Sophia, her old friend and former colleague at the practice. "Jessica, I heard what happened," Sophia said gently. "I don't know what you plan to do from now on, but I want you to know that I still have a room for you in my office." That offer was like a window opening in a dark room. Jessica remembered the words she had often repeated to the families she counselled at church. It's never too late to start over. When George returned for a conversation a week later, Jessica was calm and resolute. "I can't continue in this marriage," she said. "It's not just about the betrayal, George. It's about everything that came before, the years of absence, the broken promises, the important moments you missed." George protested, argued, and tried to bargain. In a moment of desperation, he implied that she wouldn't survive financially without him. The look Jessica gave him was enough to make him retreat, ashamed. "I never wanted you to abandon your dreams," he finally said. "But you also never did anything to help make them happen," she replied without resentment. "Now it's my turn, George. Not out of anger or revenge, but because I finally understood that I deserve more." The separation was civil, mainly for the children's sake. George, confronted with the magnitude of his failings as a husband, was surprisingly generous in the financial negotiations. The house remained with Jessica and the children, along with a comfortable allowance. Benjamin decided to continue at the university, but visited frequently. Madeleine and Gabriel chose to stay with their mother, seeing their father on alternate weekends. Sophia kept her promise. Jessica started by attending to a few patients, rebuilding her professional confidence. To her surprise, her life experience made her especially empathetic with clients facing transitions and losses. Within 6 months, her schedule was full. In a year, she needed to expand her hours. The office became a refuge where Jessica could finally exercise her vocation, helping others while healing herself. On a sunny afternoon, while walking in the park after a day of consultations, Jessica realized she was smiling for no apparent reason. It was a genuine smile, born not from the perfection of her life, but from the authenticity with which she now lived it. Your phone vibrated with a message from Sophia. "Dinner tonight to celebrate your clinic anniversary. Your kids have already confirmed their presence." Jessica replied with an enthusiastic yes and continued walking, the sun warming her face. The pain hadn't completely disappeared, probably never would. But now it shared space with something more powerful, the certainty that her story was far from over. Jessica learned that forgiving wasn't the same as forgetting. It wasn't pretending that the pain hadn't existed, nor minimizing the years she had nullified herself in the name of a love that was no longer reciprocated. True forgiveness, she understood, was an act of liberation, not of the other, but of herself. It was choosing not to carry resentment without having to forego dignity. It was moving forward with a light heart, but with eyes open. Because starting over doesn't require forgetting the past. It requires remembering it with courage, learning from it, and deciding every day that her own life also deserves a place on the priority list. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.